And for a look at the twists and turns of the Dudus case, here's Nadine McLeod.
The Dudus drama took perhaps its first drastic turn on August 28, 2009, when a document unsealed in the United States Southern District Court of New York revealed that he was wanted on drugs and gun trafficking charges. It was big news. After all, Dudus was the son of the late Tivoli Gardens era leader Jim Coke. Big news because Dudus wasn't just any era leader. He was done for an era represented in Parliament by none other than the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Bruce Golding. Big news too because Dudus is genetically linked to the ruling Jamaica Labour Party through its biggest and most powerful garrison, West Kingston. It put the government between a rock and a hard place. Analysts argued that if the government signed away Dudus to the U.S. authorities, the JLP administration would find itself in a political crisis, and if it didn't, a diplomatic one. In fact, then Justice Minister and Attorney General Dorothy Lightburn, whose job it was to sign the extradition order, declared up front as she addressed a function in September 2009 that she would not be entertaining questions about the matter. 2009 ended with the extradition request for Christopher Dudus Cokes still pending and the United States government still expressing concerns. It was a new year. 2010 started and the Dudus saga was about to deepen. In January, the U.S. authorities revealed that they would not be backing down or withdrawing the request for the Tivoli Gardens strongman. In March 2010 came the United States Narcotics Report, which questioned the government's willingness to fight crime since the Dudus extradition request was still pending. March also saw constant quarrels in Parliament about the issue as the PNP pressed the government for answers. In April, the Dudus saga took a new twist with the Manatt-Phelps controversy. It was time to take Dudus. But taking Dudus would not be easy. Tivoli residents had set up a fortress, erecting barricades to prevent the security forces from entering the community. But on Labor Day, May 24, after a weekend of unrest in West Kingston, the assault on Tivoli Gardens was launched. After days of running gun battles with criminals in the community, Dudus was not found. A manhunt was then launched. However, it would take the police almost a month before he was caught. Now caught, Dudus waived his rights to a hearing on Jamaican soil. He was instantly shipped away to the United States to stand trial. After a fierce fight, a U.S. federal court denied Cokes' motion to have the wiretap evidence against him excluded from his trial. And today, the legal fight took another turn, with Dudus changing his plea to guilty. Nadine McLeod.
Dudus Cokes took a dramatic turn today. Dudus will not stand trial after all.
The former Tivoli Gardens strongman who had first entered a not guilty plea in a New York court today went 180 degrees. He's accepted a plea deal.
We have extensive coverage of the development this evening, and first the deal. Janella Presses has the details.
Court documents obtained by TVJ News indicate that Dudus pleaded guilty on one count of racketeering conspiracy and one count of conspiracy to commit assault with a dangerous weapon stemming from his cocaine and weapons smuggling ring. On the racketeering conspiracy charge, Coke faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, a maximum term of 5 years supervised release, and a maximum fine of the greatest of $250,000 or twice the monetary gain from the offense. On the conspiracy to commit assault in the aid of racketeering charge, he faces a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison, a maximum term of 1 year of supervised release, and a maximum fine of the greatest of $250,000. In other words, the maximum on both counts is 23 years. As part of the agreement with the U.S. government, Coke has waived all his rights to withdraw his plea either by direct appeal or collaterally. Additionally, he will not be criminally prosecuted for his leadership of the presidential clique, his participation in a conspiracy to commit an assault with a dangerous weapon, and a stabbing incident of a marijuana trafficker in the Bronx in May 2007. The U.S. government will also move to dismiss any open counts against Coke. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara hailed the plea as a welcome conclusion to what he termed the ugly chapter of criminal history. But at least one former U.S. prosecutor expressed shock at Coke's decision to enter a guilty plea.
It was just about a week or so ago that the court issued their ruling in terms of the evidence that was admissible in the case. And sometimes there's a certain time period that passed where a defendant and their counsel would speak about the facts of the case and make an assessment, and obviously that must have been in place.
Christopher Cokes is scheduled to be sentenced by Judge Patterson on December 8, 2011. Janella Press.
Dudus Cokes has presided over a powerful enclave, Tivoli Gardens. The people who live in that community are fiercely loyal to the man they call the president. How do they feel about his decision to plead guilty in New York today? Krista Samuels has just returned from Tivoli Gardens.
It's Minister 5 in the evening, and the news of Christopher Cokes' guilty plea has just started to spread in Tivoli Gardens. In some parts of the community, groups of people congregate, some discussing the news. The people did not want to speak to us on camera for fear they might be targeted by the security forces, but they gave us their reactions. The consensus: shock and disbelief.
It's surprising to hear such news. It coming, I wonder if it's a hoax news. A reality thing, because we know it's at the 15th supposed to be the trial.
And although many are still waiting to hear exactly why the man they call Prezi took such a decision, some are already speculating.
I'm frustrated because his mother dead and him can't come to our funeral. So therefore I just feel that that's why him just plead guilty to everything. But I don't really plead guilty, you know. That's just because him man just frustrated. So him just say what he want to say.
Still, it's a hard pill for the people to swallow, particularly because of the help they say Christopher Cokes used to provide in the community.
We don't have anybody to help us. We send our children to school. So maybe some of children are not even going to go. So for them going up the stay home.
But it's like a fake with more, you know. Yeah? Because in my mind, I feel say I come home soon. It didn't in my mind say maybe him get a 3 or 4 year stretch. But based on where we're here right now, we don't know if it's going to look for him. So it's a fake with enough. Yeah? Because it's a see how the place stagnant. Everybody sit down on the corner. Then not even can sit down on the corner go cry for 3-4 months sit down one place, them come disrespect and dig them up and I work no there for no youth, you know. And when a youth left idle hands to idle things.
To just spend in prison as a result of the plea deal? For a legal perspective, we're joined live on the telephone by Wayne Golding, a criminal attorney at law out of the United States. Good evening, Mr. Golding, and first, your reaction. Were you surprised by the deal?
Well, I am not surprised. Being a part of the system, the federal system, you get to understand that 97%, up to 97% of the cases that are charged are won by the federal system. You know, the conviction rate is very high in the federal system. And the reason why it's high is because most defendants plea in federal cases. And it's usually because by the time the federal government actually takes you into custody, they've already made their case. They constantly have legal guidance in their investigation. So by the time they've arrested you, most of the time, they've had the case sewn up from day one.
But I ask you this, we're not so used to the issue of plea bargaining. Well, clearly when you go that route, there's something in it for you. You're giving up something. You're turning out like a canary.
Well, not necessarily. It's what we call, it's in your best interest to plea, because as a lawyer, I tell you, your best lawyering is done outside of court. If you wait until you get in front of a jury to really show your lawyering skills, most of the time your client might suffer an adverse effect. So the idea of the plea is working out the best possible scenario for your client without taking the risk of facing a jury that will possibly give you a guilty verdict and send you to prison for a long, undetermined amount of time. With a plea, you know exactly what you're getting.
Question. He would have had to give up something.
Well, that's going to be speculated on by you and I, because we don't know what the actual deal is between his lawyers and the government and himself. But it simply means he's pleading guilty to the charges, acknowledging his guilt, In consideration of sentencing, however, there are many factors that will be looked at. One is level of cooperation. Two is acceptance of responsibility. And three, what the sentencing guidelines are and what the pluses and minuses can be as a result of his cooperation. So this is a situation where the government tied up everything in a nice, neat little bow package called racketeering. And what it could have meant is that the government could have gone back and what we call superseded the indictment, because I think they gave some indication that there were a lot more things that they knew about that they could have added to this. And I think in the best interest of his situation, being Mr. Cokes' situation, he had to have a long sit down with his attorneys and look at the pros and the cons of going to trial and look at what evidence they told him or they showed him that they had, and come to a conclusion that a plea might be his best option.
Might I ask you this? 23 years he's looking at. Chances are you'll come out when he's 65 years old. How many of those years do you think they'll cut away for good behavior and singing like a canary?
Well, at a minimum, the 20 years and the 3 years are the maximum penalty you could have gotten. That doesn't say that's what he will be sentenced to. The judge will look at his prior criminal record, if he has any prior convictions, and what tier he falls into. So saying 23 years doesn't necessarily mean 23 years at sentencing. Building in all the factors, including time served, including time off, because usually on federal sentences, you serve about 85% of the time. You're looking at anywhere with the guidelines being what they are, probably a sentence of anywhere from 15 to 20 years. Because that 3 years normally for the assault, the RICO assault charge, they might have ran that, concurrently, meaning run it with the sentence with a 20-year sentence instead of stacking it with a 20-year sentence. So nobody really knows until the judge drops that gavel, and it all depends on what kind of situation he's in, whether he's going to get what is called a 5K, which is a reward for really cooperating and causing other shoes to drop, so to speak, off other feet.
Let me ask you this one finally. I know it's the U.S. jurisdiction, but in light of the global world, would that judge be mindful of the numbers of persons who died, the fact that he was on the run, and all the other atrocities associated with him in Jamaica? Would that weigh on his mind in his sentencing decision?
Well, one thing that has to be done is what is called a sentencing memorandum, which I do on all of my federal cases, which is basically you are telling the judge the positive qualities and why the judge should give a good sentence to your client, as well as quoting the rules. The government also has a choice to rebut that and to present negative evidence if they want a harsh sentence or whatever. So it all depends on the government's attitude. It's going to reflect in the judge's attitude, because usually the judges will somewhat go along with whatever the agreement is between the government and the defendant. And on absent egregious circumstances, usually the judge will follow the recommendations as given by the government. So I think in a plea situation, and this is where good lawyering comes in, from day one, his lawyers started talking to the government the very first day to see how this case could have been resolved. So
Mr. Wayne Golding, alas, we're going to have to leave it there. You have been most helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Infamous Rent at YouTube.